Good evening, everybody, including brothers and sisters, and welcome along to our class tonight. What we want to do tonight is, we are to be looking at the nurturing of Sarah's faith, but I want to also do look at the unique circumstances of Isaac's birth and what the implications of it. So it's almost like two classes into one. But so what we want to do is we want to first of all just come to Isaiah 51. We were there in our first class, but we just want to look here concerning Sarah and the problems that Sarah suffered, or the problem. You know, in Isaiah 51, remember we looked there and it says that we were to listen, to hearken unto God, ye that follow after righteousness, and you're seeking Yahweh. If you're pursuing after him, then to look to that rock from which you have been hewn, and look unto the hole of the pit from which you've been dug. So we've been hewn from the rock, the same rock as our father Abraham, and we've been dug from this hole of the pit, which represents Sarah. So the verse 2 says, look unto Abraham your father, and unto Sarah that bare you. So obviously Abram's our father and Sarah is our mother. And what that means is something we have to come to understand ourselves in our own personal life. That Abram is our father. And tonight we're going to be looking at Sarah. But you see in verse 3 it says, Yahweh shall comfort Zion. It's really, the prophet's really saying that it's Sarah. Yahweh shall comfort Sarah. He'll comfort all her waste places. He'll make her wilderness like Eden, and her desert like the garden of Yahweh. And joy and gladness shall be found therein, and the voice of thanksgiving and the voice of melody. So here's Sarah, and you notice what it says there. It talks about three aspects in her life: comforting her waste places, her wilderness, and her desert. And when you look at Sarah's life, as it's set out in the Word, you find that she was probably barren for about 60 years. When you look in the genealogies in Genesis chapter 11, they were having children in their 30s, and she conceived when she was 90. So there was 60 years of her barrenness. So that first waste place was, it says in Genesis 11, she was barren and had no child. And there was 45 years of that. But then it was worse when she was still barren and Abraham had a son by Hagar. And she had to endure that, for 13 years. That rolled on for another 13 years. This was a wilderness in her life. Her husband had gone into another woman and produced a son. And then when her cycle stopped, it says that, remember, it talks about it was no longer after the manner of woman with Sarah. Her cycle had ceased, and now she was utterly barren. She knew she could never produce a child. And she was a godly woman. And that was her utter desert. And you see, that would have been the case for any woman in those circumstances in that household if she was suffering those things. But against that, because she was a godly woman, and because she feared God and respected him in her life, and she had a meek and quiet spirit, as we saw, the promises were set against that from Abraham was going to come a great nation. Your seed, I've given this land. To you and your seed are going to be like the dust of the earth. And your seed is going to be like the stars of heaven. Can you imagine how that added to her anguish and the inability to produce a seed for the promises. And then when she's told she can have a child, when she's told she's going to have that child, she cannot believe it. It's disbelief. It's just not possible. And so when God says here, well, look here, and you're seeking my face in there, you're seeking me, and he says in Isaiah 51, you're seeking my face. Well, when you look here, when you look at this aspect of the word here, and you're seeking me here, you know what you're going to find? You're going to find that I'm a nursing father. Not only that, you're going to find there that when you consider that I'm a caring and patient father. And I will provide for the circumstances in my children's life for their faith to come to fruition. As we will see just later in the class, how all these circumstances had to be contrived to bring Sarah to the point where she could conceive. And here's the principle. And it comes out of the voice of Elizabeth in the New Testament. But here's the principle. And blessed is she that believeth, that there shall be, and that's out of the margin of the AB, there shall be a performance of the things that were told her of the Lord. Blessed is she believed, because then there will be a performance of the things that are told her. If there's no faith, there's no performance of the things that are promised. That underwrites Sarah's life, and it underwrites our own life. Where there's no belief, there will be no performance. You see, if we're sitting here tonight and we don't believe that God's going to bring us into the kingdom, there will not be a performance of that. That's the principle that underlines what we see here in the word. And of course, Sarah, she's like that smoking flax, you know, and Isaiah talks about the smoking flax. He's not going to quench a smoking flax, going to blow that smoking flax into a flame, you know, because the angel came, of course, and Sarah just laughs with incredulity. She cannot believe that it's possible that she's going to have a child. I'm waxed old. Shall I have pleasure, my Lord, being old also? And the angel says, why did Sarah laugh? And say, shall of a surety be a child? Doesn't she know that there's nothing too wonderful for Yahweh to do? And of course, she couldn't reach unto that. But you see, it wasn't just the angel that would return. As he told her, I'll return at the set time this year. She had to, at the same time, she had to manifest a faith for that child to be conceived. Through faith also, Sarah herself, she received strength to conceive. So there's the circumstances of her life when she was past age, because she judged him faithful that had promised. That was the basis of it. She judged him faithful that had made that promise. And there's a confidence there and assurance in that which God has promised that he will do. Now you see, when we're looking at the story of Sarah, you know, we read in Psalm 19, he makes the barren woman to keep house and be a joyful mother of children, and that. And we want to just think for a moment and say, was this what this is about? Is this a story here about Sarah receiving strength that she might bring forth Isaac and the seed? And you see, when we look at the covenants of promise, and if I said to you now, like, is this just what the story is about? This section is about Sarah. She's got to come to faith, and she's got to be strengthened. She might conceive, and therefore she's going to bring forth Isaac. And if I said to you, and this is part of it, if I said to you, in Abram's life, what is the most important event in that arrangement of Abram and the Abrahamic covenant? What's the most important aspect in the Abrahamic covenant? We might think of different things. And so here, if we look here, and we don't have to guess, because when we look at it, it's so obvious. You see, there's the life and times of Abram. So you put the chapters across the top, 15 chapters. And then if we put in a couple of lines there, he's 75 when he comes into the land, and 175. So we've got 15 chapters and 100 years. But you see, when we look here, we've got 4 chapters in 1 year. Just 1 year. 1/100th of what's recorded. 1/100th of the 100-year span. Suddenly we've got over a quarter of the record is about one event. That's the birth of Isaac. So it's obvious what's the most important thing when it comes to the promises and the covenant of Abraham. It's the birth of Isaac. Because you can tell just by looking there. And so that's what we want to consider for the moment, you see, because you see in these events surrounding the birth of Isaac, what's this about? Why is this so important? You see, here's the covenant being established. Here's circumcision. And you see, if I said to you, well, what's circumcision? And most people would say circumcision is the cutting off of the flesh. Well, if that's all it is, and that's all you're going to say, it's wrong. It's part of the cutting off of the flesh. But it's much more than that. And what we want to just see is, as we go through this first part of our classes, we want to see that when we look at circumcision and that, it's a testimony, circumcision, and the power of circumcision and what it speaks of is a testimony to the greatness of Yahweh's love and care. It's a witness to his ability to bring about his purpose in the earth, and which he alone is glorified in, that no flesh will glory in his presence. That's circumcision. And that's just what I wanted to show you, want to do and look and see that for a moment what it is. And so what we want to do is we want to go, well, there's that year. So where do we go back to get the foundation and the start of it? And that's here in Genesis chapter 15. So we know in Genesis chapter 15 what happens. Remember, Abram says, look, you've given me no heir. The heir in my house is Eliezer. And so what he does is he says, well, come outside. He takes them outside and he says, look now towards the heavens. And he says, if you can number those stars, so shall your seed be. So he's told here in Genesis chapter 15, his seed's going to be like the stars of heaven. Now he already knows from Genesis chapter 13, when he's told that his seed's going to be like the dust of earth for number, that he's not being told again that your seed's going to be multitudinous. Something's being added to that. And so when we think about this, and I just want you to think about this for a moment, and that is that when we add this verse from Isaiah, and we're looking now at the literal heavens, it says, lift up your eyes on high, and who hath created these? And that brings out this host by number. He calls them all by names, and by the greatness of his might, not that he's strong in power, not one fails. And here's the question that the prophet's asking, who has created these? Now that's the physical heavens. But Abram's just been told, that's what your offspring's going to be like. So now we ask the question, well, we're looking at the same thing again now, and we're seeing there now Abram's seed. We ask the same question, who has created these? You see? You've got to link those two ideas together. Who's created these? And you see, what it tells us is, of course, is that they're numbered. And they're all named. And also that they're light-bearing bodies. And they're sustained by divine power. So there, that's just taking those ideas there out of Isaiah. But now we're thinking about Abram's offspring. who has created these? And then, of course, the stars in this, remember in Genesis it says, they rule over the earth. And we know his offspring are going to be kings. And they divide the light from the darkness. So we know also a priest's lips should keep knowledge, and that a priest have to exercise judgment, and that is a judgment. The Levites will therefore exercise judgment in the nation. They're going to be priests. And then, of course, they're going to be sons of God. And they'll be Abram's seed. Now we can see that because we're taking the record and going back and putting that there. So Abram, of course, it said there, and we ask the question again: who has created these? And then even when you come through into John the Baptist understood this whole thing through here, and when they came out to him and so forth, he says, well, don't think to say to yourself, you got Abram to your father, because they pointed to circumcision and said, we're Abram's seed. They didn't understand what circumcision meant. The very thing that the nation pointed to prove they're Abram's seed disproved it in that sense. God can raise up stones, seed Abram from these stones. Notice what he says, God is the one who raises up Abram's seed. He can raise up Abram's seed from these stones. So those some ideas there that we have to think about. And of course, Abram believed that God could do that. That's why righteousness was imputed to him at that time. Remember, it says, and Yahweh imputed righteousness to him, because he believed that God would accomplish that, but he had no idea how that could be carried out. No idea how that would be. None. And we know that because, you see, that was Genesis chapter 15. And when we come into Genesis 16, of course, what happens? On the strength of the flesh, Abram and Sarah decide they'll make an attempt to fulfill the promise by giving Hagar to Abram to be his wife. Yeah, we'll solve the issue of the seed by the strength of the flesh. And just taking a part quote out of John 1 verse 13, if you want to write it down, you can see this how this all fits here. Abram's seed are not produced by the will of the flesh, nor the will of man. They are produced by the will of God. And so, what happens, of course, is that Ishmael comes forth, and then, of course, the record rolls on, and we come to Genesis chapter 17. But of course, in the meantime, in those 13 years, it's ceased to be with Sarah after the manner of woman. When the angel comes in Genesis 18, she's utterly barren. And when Abram in Romans chapter 4, it talks about his consideration, when the angel comes to him, and if we just come to Genesis 17 for a moment, because you see, Genesis 17 is telling us and describing to us how Abram's seed are going to be like the stars of heaven. This is how it's going to be. Because in Genesis 15, of course, God made a covenant on that self-same day. Unto thy seed I've given this land, in Genesis chapter 15. But when we come here into Genesis chapter 17, God comes to him and says, now I'm going to build this covenant. And you see, that in the circumstance as he comes here in Genesis chapter 17, Sarah's utterly barren. Abram considers his own body and it's dead. He can't produce any children. So there's no possibility that either of them can produce an offspring. And God comes to him there in verse 1, and he says, he comes to him as El Shaddai. We haven't got time, we're going to keep moving along, but El Shaddai is there as a nursing father. So God appears unto him as El Shaddai, means the strength of the mighty ones, the strength to nurture at the breast. You can go through the different things in Genesis to show how it shows. It's always El Shaddai is used in the context of establishing a family. I'm El Shaddai, God says to Abram there, and I'm a nursing father. And you see what he says there in verse 2? He says, look, my covenant is between, I've got to tell you this, and I want you to understand this, my covenant is between me and you. He says it 4 times through here, and that's why we say the Abrahamic covenant is absolutely personal. I mean, you can go through the record in Genesis chapter 17, and 35 times he refers to Abram. You, your seed after you, your house. 35 times in the conversation. And 18 times he says, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do this, 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 and you're going to have this. He's explaining that all to him. But you notice what he says there. What he says in verse 2, you're going to be multiplied, you're going to be multiplied exceedingly. And not only that, I'm going to change your name. Your name's no longer going to be Abram. Your name's going to be Abrahamon. That Abrahamon, you're going to be a father of Haman, a multitude. Abraham, the father of a multitude of nations. You're going to be exceeding fruitful. You're going to be the father of a multitude of nations. Your name's now Abram. And see there in verse 6, I'm going to make you exceeding fruitful. And nations are going to come out of you. Kings are going to come out of you. And this is an everlasting covenant. And you're going to have an everlasting, you and your seed are going to have an everlasting possession of the land. And then in the last, in verse 8 at the end of it, he says, and I'm going to be their God. And you can trace that through the word, and when that phrase is used, what it means is, it's used in Exodus, the tabernacle, it's used in Revelation, it means I'm going to dwell in the midst of your seed. That's what the phrase means when it says, I'll be your God. I'm going to dwell in the midst, just like he did in the tabernacle. But you come to Revelation, it means he's going to dwell in the midst of the seed, in that individual. Now, the sign of this covenant is circumcision. The sign of all this fruitfulness and seed coming forth and being multiplied and so forth, and nations coming forth to you, the sign of this covenant between me and you is circumcision. You cut off the flesh of your foreskin. And I will then give you a son from Sarah. And if someone in your house doesn't do that, they'll be cut off. You think about and stand back and think about what that means. Abram's body's dead. Sarah's utterly barren. And you're going to be circumcised to make it abundantly clear and so obvious unto you that the flesh will not produce any of Abram's seed. All Abram's seed will be begotten of God. Because that's the sign, one of the signs of circumcision here is shared fatherhood. It's shared fatherhood. And that's what John says. He gave, as much as believed him, he gave them authority. They were born not of blood. In John 1 verse 13, that verse there, they were born of blood. It ceased after Sarah to be after man and woman. Not of the will of the flesh. Their bodies were dead. And not after the will of man. Go into Hagar. They are born of God. This is the very heart. This is the very heart of the Abrahamic covenant. That this covenant brings forth sons of God. And when it says there, and this is what, when it says there, and the unique circumstances here of Isaac's birth, and it says there, "In Isaac shall your seed be called." And you think about the circumstances, therefore, of this bringing forth of Isaac. That when it says, "In Isaac thy seed shall be called," what it means is in the manner of birth, not in genealogy, not because you've begotten Isaac and he'll beget Jacob. In the manner of their birth, it's those who are in Isaac. And they're in Isaac because they're identified with him to the point of just being the same. It's talking about the manner of their begettal. That's what Paul uses that argument in Romans. He says, "Not all Israel's of Israel. In Isaac shall I see people." But he says, come over to Romans just for a moment. It's just here really clearly in Romans. And I hope you can see that just that picture really clearly how that Genesis 17 gives the details of how Genesis 15 is how it worked. But if you just come to Genesis chapter 9 for a moment, you see what it says there. In verse 7, "Neither because they are the seed of Abram are they all children, and Abram had other sons. But in Isaac shall the seed be called." Now notice what it says. That is, they which are the children of the flesh, so it's Ishmael and the other sons of the concubines. These aren't the children of God. But the children of the promise are counted for the seed. For this is the word of promise. The angel said, "At this time will I return, I will come and return, and then Sarah shall conceive." You see, begotten of God. And so you think about that. Oh, brothers and sisters, I've spent ages thinking about this. I think about it all the time. Thinking about this whole arrangement here in Genesis. What it means. And God says there in Isaiah 51, "You're seeking me, you're looking for me. Well, go and have a look there." You know what you're going to find when you're looking at Sarah, your mother? You know what you're going to find? I'm your father. And I can tell you, when you run that through your head and you think about that and spend time meditating about it and thinking about the whole process and what's going on and how God's accomplishing it, then I can tell you it's extremely comforting. You see what circumcision is? It's a demonstration that God's going to fulfill his purpose outside of flesh. Change your name and put the fifth letter in. It's a demonstration of his grace. They couldn't produce a child. He's being gracious. And it's also where it's seen, it's an example of faith, because when Abram's told us in Genesis 17, he falls on his face. He can suddenly see what God's doing. And he's flat on his face. He's glorifying God. He can see, oh, this is how it's going to be. Because the thing is, this, brothers and sisters, and this is because, you see, because it's in Isaac. Isaac's just like a prototype. He's the first. It says in Hebrews, Sarah laid a foundation by conceiving Isaac, of that city which Abram looked for, in which God dwells. And so Abram could see that just in the birth of this one son, the principle of it, the unique way it was brought about, he could see the birth of all his offspring. He's lying flat on the ground. Is anything too wonderful for Yahweh. He believes. And you see, he believes. But of course, Sarah doesn't. She doesn't believe. And she's got to bring forth that child. And you see, this is the other thing here, that Sarah has to be brought to an understanding that she can conceive. Because when, of course, in Genesis 17, Genesis 18, the angels come there and they're telling Abraham, look, it's just a year. It's just 1 year. This is going to happen in a year. And so in that year, this is what had to happen to bring Sarah. And I just want to show you because it's the most marvellous thing. You can just see this. This is what had to happen in Sarah's life, in their life together, to bring her to the point where she could have faith and understand that God was faithful, and she could receive that strength therefore on the basis that God had all the power. There's no measuring of his power and ability. But she had to come to the point of belief before she could conceive. And so here's the event. Of course, the covenant is announced, Abram, Genesis chapter 17. So here's between those two lines, those two, those of these 4 chapters here in this 1 year. So there's the visit of the angels, and they're told at the appointed time will return, and Sarah's going to conceive. Sarah just laughed with incredulity. Now here's the thing. You know, it's a saying in the world, and it's so true. If you keep doing the same thing on the same day and every day, you're never going to get a different result. And you know, they've been in Hebron 20 years. 20 years they've been in Hebron, and God knew that there would have to be a change to bring a different result. And so this is what happened, of course. The angels arrive and they announce the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, and the cities of the plain are going to be destroyed. El Shaddai, the power of the mighty ones, to nurture and to destroy. So Abram, of course, makes that prayer of intercession. And then Sodom's destroyed. And then, of course, after 20 years, they suddenly up and they go south to Gerar. And then Sarah's in Abimelech's house. And God smites Abimelech's house and closes all the wounds in the house. And Abram prays, and because he's a prophet, and he entreats God, and the wounds are opened. And Sarah receives, therefore, because she, you see all these circumstances had to occur because you see what happens is that when Sarah sees, God closes up the wombs in Abimelech's house. So Sarah's taken from Hebron and put in Abimelech's house so that she can witness that it says that those wombs were utterly shut, just like hers. And then God said, and we'll just when we come back, we'll see, and then God says to Abraham, he's a prophet, he'll pray for you. And she saw that the prayer of her husband, and we'll come back to this in a reason, was efficacious to open wounds. That he prayed to the Father, and he opened up the wounds in that house. So if he could pray to the Father and open those wounds, he can pray to the Father and open my wound. The problem's always been here with me. Now think about that arrangement for a moment. What that took to get Sarah to this year and so forth, and to transform Sarah. You know what I mean? Because of course, the last thing is she receives strength to conceive, and of course, suddenly she's transformed by that. All this to transform her, and she conceives, and she feels that child within her, of course, and then there's a voice of joy and gladness and thanksgiving, the voice of melody and so forth. That's the result of it, to bring her to that point of utter transformation in the provision of this special son. So you see, here's all the circumstances, and this is what happened. You see, if you go back and just come back to Genesis, and I'll just show you this. Here, back to Genesis 18. Here's the circumstances, and here's providence, and here was the father at work. You see me as a nursing father. Well, you watch my care now for Sarah and what I did for her to bring her to this point where she could believe. Watch these circumstances, and here they are in Genesis. You come to Genesis 18, and you come to Abram's intercessory prayer, and you come to the last verse of the chapter, and notice what it says. He goes down through the numbers till he gets to 10. If there's 10 in there, will you save the city? And notice what it says. And Yahweh went his way, that's the name-bearing angel, as soon as he had left communing with Abram. He left. He finished communing when Abram got to 10. Abram didn't finish the conversation in that sense. The angel left at 10. And Yahweh went his way and so forth. So you see, his intercessionary prayer is finished at 10. And the angel leaves as soon as he had left communion. And so what happens, of course, is the very next morning, Abram gets up, early at the place and so forth where he stood with the name-bearing angel, because he's up on the mountain like that, where they were looking, because where he was making intercession, they could look down into the valley, they could see all the cities down there, and he goes to that same place, and it's going up like a furnace. It was completely and utterly overthrown. And you see, he had no knowledge that Lot had been delivered because of his prayer and his two daughters. He had no understanding. He thought that they'd still been completely destroyed. Imagine that. That's the longest thing that Abram says in the whole of Testament, his intercessory prayer, as he pours his heart out on behalf of the ecclesia in Sodom. And boom, God's just wiped them out. And you see, what happened, of course, is this probably just on Abram and Sarah, because there is a possibility that Lot's Sarah's brother. That's just, some people think it's just with the Hebrew and that, but it doesn't even matter. It was a close relative, and they thought there'd be at least 50 there. And so it causes them to be dislocated after 20 years. They want to get out of there. I mean, looking into that valley, imagine what it looked like. And those people they had known. Imagine how that would affect you, like people that you'd known in an ecclesia, 50 just wiped out like that. And so they go down south, and they go down, and of course they come into the house of Abimelech and so forth, and they brought down south, and of course Sarah's brought into the house of Abimelech. Now, what do you think about Abimelech? Like an uncircumcised Philistine. Well, that's what he was. What sort of man is he? Where did God put Sarah? What sort of man is Abimelech? Well, what you think about this. When God appears unto him in a dream, he calls him Lord. He's respectful of God. Are you going to slay a righteous nation? Will you also slay a righteous nation? God says, you're a dead man. If you lay your hands on that other man's wife, you're a dead man and your house with you. He says, are you going to slay a righteous nation? He understands what's happened to Sodom and Gomorrah, and he appeals to God on the basis of the understanding that God's just. You're going to also slay a righteous nation? And what about having this on your CV? where Yahweh says to him, I know you did this in the integrity of your heart. You didn't lay a hand on her. And not only that, I withheld you from sinning against me. You see, that was an act of kindness on God's part, because you see, if Abimelech had laid his hand on Sarah, then Yahweh's purpose with her as the mother of all Abram's offspring would have been marred. I withheld you from sinning against me and my purpose. Yes, it would have been adultery, but I don't think that's what the Father means in that sense there. He's still thinking about his purpose with Abram and Sarah. I withheld you from doing that. It would have been your death. If you'd gone near her, actually, and went to lay a hand on her, you would have been dead. And so he tells them this is what's going to happen. You restore the man his wife. And he rises early, just like Abram does when he's distressed. He rises early because of the sending away of Ishmael. He rises early because of Lot and Sodom. He rises early when he goes to offer Isaac, and so does Abimelech. He rises early because his whole household is under the threat of death. And then he restores Sarah. God said to him, you restore Sarah. So he restores Sarah, but not like Pharaoh who gave gifts before. He restores Sarah and he gives gifts of sheep and oxen and men servants and maid servants to Abram. Here's your wife back, and here are all these gifts. And then he gives Abram 1,000 pieces of silver to make a public proclamation to all that were involved that she was another man's wife and he had never laid a hand on her. He gives Abram 1,000 pieces of silver as a witness to that fact. This is different, isn't it, to Pharaoh in Egypt? But what about Abram and Sarah? Here is the moment when they're going to conceive. Here's the moment when they're going to bring forth this unique son. This very moment. And it's Abram and Sarah. It's not Abram and Sarai. It's Abram standing there in Gerar with a mark in his flesh. God says, I've made an everlasting covenant with you. Your seed's going to possess the land for an everlasting possession. And he's got a mark in his flesh to prove it. And that at that very time, the mark in his flesh was there because at that very time, Sarah was going to conceive. And he says, no, she's my sister and she's taken into Abimelech's house right at that time. And and then, of course, it's just the same again. Now we've been over this before, brothers and sisters. See what happens when your faith leaves you, and this is what had happened to them 20-odd years ago, and suddenly they're in that same situation again, and they're distressed and disrupted and so forth. They go to this fallback position. You see what happens when faith drains out of our lives, and it does. You've got to admit, brothers and sisters, this is just us here. It's just a picture of ourselves. When faith drains out of our lives, I mean, I can, say something. I remember, years ago, not so didn't like giving thanks in a restaurant. Someone might see me. Well, here's your faith. You think Abram, didn't show any courage? He thought he was going to be slain. Just thought someone's going to look at you. But I'll tell you what, when you have got faith, it matters nothing. It doesn't matter what they think. You know what I mean? But here's the circumstance, you see, because it's so true to life. And this is where you see that God's accomplishing his own purpose, and he's bringing it out of this clay. You know, oftentimes, brothers and sisters, we're too frightened to admit that we've made a mistake in life. We won't admit it to others. But if someone makes a mistake in life, we go, what were they doing? I mean, for goodness sake. And that's just how life is. And so you see what happens is when faith just drains away and we're left to our own resources, that's just the flesh. So what happens, of course, it's just the same again. Abraham imputes the worst motives to Abimelech just on supposition. I thought there was no fear of God in this place. When God appeared unto Abimelech and his men in a dream, they were terrified. They didn't rebel against that. And then he puts Sarah in a compromising position when he knows that it's the set time. And then when Abimelech comes to him and says, what have you done to us? You know, how have I offended you and what you've brought this on me and my kingdom? This great sin. You've done deeds to us that ought not to be done. You know, Abram, he's just like there, you know, he starts spluttering out all this stuff. You know, of a truth, she's my sister. That's what he says as a reply. He tries to justify what he's done. Of a truth, she's my sister. Of a truth, she was his wife. And then he goes on there, when God caused me to wander from my father's house, God never caused him to wander anywhere. God asked him to leave and told him exactly where he's going. God caused me to wander. It doesn't look good, does it? And you see, here's the point. Now, remember when we looked with Abram and Sarah in Egypt, and this is what we saw. Remember, we saw Abram in the same condition, but we saw Sarah completely different. We saw Sarah with the spirit of submission. We saw that her meekness, her quietness, the hidden man of the heart. We saw all that in Sarah there, and God says, that's precious in my sight. So he delivered them out of Egypt on account of Sarah. Not here. Abimelech says, even she herself said, he's my brother. And then, when he gives 1,000 pieces of silver, he says, I've given 1,000 pieces of silver to your brother. Thus she was reproved. And here's the father and mother of Isaac. And you know what you see there, brothers and sisters? You know what you see? Did they deserve the gift of a son when it was given? Different to Egypt, because you see, here it's God outworking his own purpose in spite of Abram and Sarah. You see that? And you see that, brothers and sisters, do. And think about this. Think about it. Do any of us, now think outwardly, deserve the gift of a son? So despite ourselves, Yahweh will fulfill his purpose for himself, and we will be the beneficiaries of that, undeserving of it. It's just a picture of ourselves. But, of course, and this is the thing, Abram, and this is the thing, brothers and sisters, Abram maintained a far different relationship to Yahweh than Abimelech ever would. He was his friend. He was a prophet. And that's what God says to him. He is a prophet, and he will pray for you and for your house, and you will be healed. So you see all these circumstances and that to bring Sarah, Abram believes, this is all to help Sarah. The whole arrangement is to help her come to the point where she can believe. This circumstances was contrived by God. You see his care and his outworking labours. He brings her through all these circumstances and into Abimelech's house, closing up the wounds and so forth. Abram, because you see, they would have probably thought Abram's intercessory prayer before at Sodom hadn't been heard. And now she sees this intercessory prayer of Abram opening up the wounds in this house. And she comes to that point of faith. Because she sees that God is, she sees that Abram can offer up prayer and open the wounds in Abimelech's house, and she sees the power of God put forth in opening those wounds that were utterly shut, and she understands that therefore can be done for her. But you know what it says in Hebrews? It says that by faith she obtained strength to conceive seed, and that's why we sing that hymn, because she judged him faithful. He promised. It was based upon her understanding of Yahweh. And so it says there, of course, and here's the language. So she's come to that point of belief. She's exhibiting that faith, and just hear the language. So Yahweh visited Sarah as he had said, and Yahweh did to Sarah as he had spoken, for Sarah conceived and bare Abram a son in his old age at the set time of which God had spoken to him. You see what it took to bring forth that son? Faith. Sarah's faith. You know, blessed is she that believeth, for there will be a performance of those things that are believed. That's the power of faith. But it was by divine intervention Yahweh visited Sarah. Abram was a circumcised man. Can you see that, brothers and sisters? You see how, therefore, it's all to the glory of God? And it's, and of course, you see that and you marvel at it. You know, you go there and God says, you go here to Sarah, you know what you're going to see? You're going to find there, you're going to find that if Sarah's your mother, well, I'm your father. Well, that's what the Abrahamic Covenant's about. But if you go there and you look at Sarah, your mother, you look at the care I bestowed upon her, look at what I did to bring her to the point where she could believe. That's what I'm like. You see that? And so the household was transformed. See, it wasn't just the fact that Sarah felt that child in her tummy. You can imagine what that felt for after 60 years of barrenness, when that first movement happened inside her, the quickening. It wasn't just the transformation of that household and the joy and the thanksgiving and the voice of melody and so forth. It wasn't just because her barrenness was gone. It was because that the child that they were given was given of Yahweh himself. That caused that response, that transforming response. And you can think about it ourselves, brothers and sisters, because you see this is, and Sarah, you see, Sarah understood and she saw the ramifications of it. She came to faith. She saw the ramifications of the whole thing. She understood the promises. Your seed's going to be like the stars of heaven for multitude. In Genesis 17, it's going to be circumcision, and that's the sign of this covenant of fruitfulness and multiplication. And this is what she says there. Sarah said, God's made me to laugh. All that, so that all who hear this, what's been done, they will laugh with me for this thing that's been done. She said, who would have said unto Abram that Sarah should have given children suck? I've borne him a son in his old age. I've given children suck, because you see, in Isaac she saw the begettal of all his seed. As she held Isaac there and understood the way he had begotten, and all Abram's seed would be begotten the same way, she gave suck to all his offspring. In faith. You see that, brothers and sisters? And you think about it. You think about the wonder of it. That this is how it was done. And it's so comforting. Because you look in the record and you see that we're no different to Abram and Sarah. That when this came to the provision of this unique son, both they knew, and they would have looked back and understood they weren't deserving of that divine care and that divine provision. And that's where we sit. That's where we sit with the provision of the Son of God. It's just exactly the same. Yahweh will achieve his purpose regardless of us. And the thing is, brothers and sisters, and this is what you think about. You see, the fact of the matter is that God is bringing, you wonder at this, that out of a constitution that came out of transgression, and everything that came with it, and you see the weakness there of Abram and Sarah, everything that came with it, that he's bringing out of that a multitude will show forth his character and his glory in the earth. And you understand, it's out of weakness. That he's doing that. We don't have to worry about it when we make a mistake. We all do. When we disbelieve. We go to the meeting on Sunday and we're singing and our minds are united. As we sung tonight, your mind's on those things. We're all singing together. We're thinking about the future, and it lifts your mind up and so forth. You take 2 steps out the door and bang. But you come back. So there's some thoughts. The unique aspect of Isaac's birth and what it meant, and of course the circumstances, nurturing that faith in Sarah, looking there and seeing the divine care, God as a father, and to his children, and his care for those who believe in him, but they need to be brought to that point of faith.